In this video, we will be exploring how to create a NestJS microservice. For this example, we will create two services. One is API gateway and another is user service. We will be connecting the two services by NestJS microservice TCP transportation. Let's create a user service application through the Next CLI. After the creation successful, we will make some cleanup. We will remove some unnecessary file which will no longer be used in this project. The ESLint, the PTR and some of their initial boilerplate module like the controller, app controller and also the app testing spec and app service. And also we will remove this reference from our app module. Now let's go to the main.js main.ts file and change the port to 4200 and start this application to check everything is up and running. And we will add a console log to check which port our application is running on. Now let's go to Postman and check our application is up and running. So our application is running. Now create a model for our users. We will create a model TS and add a DTO. Creating class create user DTO by following properties username and password. We also need to create a controller. For this we will create users controller.ts. Inside the controller we will import some decorator from nestjs/common. And now use the controller decorator and name it users. We'll define a user controller class to add some routes to it. Inside the user controller class we will define a method using the post decorator which will be used to create user, and the method will accept payload as our DTO create user DTO, and also add another route to get the as individual user by their username, which will accept parameter as username and return the users object. Now we have our user controller ready. Now let's import it on our app module and add it to the controllers array. Let's create a service for our user controller which will be used to implement the logic for our users controller route. Inside the user service, we will first import the injectable from NestJS common and create a class user service using the injectable decorator. Inside the user service, we will define a users variable with our following user object username and password. Create a method create user which accepts the user object and push it to the user object to the users variable, and after that it return the last user which we inserted into the user array. After that we will also add another method which will get user by username which accept the username and return the following object which matches the username. Add user service to the app module in providers array. In user controller, now add user service as a dependency and inside the constructor parameter. Now call the user service create user method inside the create user route and pass the body payload to it. And also call the get user by username inside the get user route. Let's start our application and test it on Postman. Let's check our app is perfectly running, and then we will try to create a user using the post method following the username and password payload. Now as you can see our user is created successfully. Let's try to get it by username. So this time our username is John. We'll copy it from here and try to get this user info, and we get this information successfully. Let's try to create another user using another name and try to fetch the username by this username. And you also see that it was worked successfully. So our user app is successfully up and running, and the both API create and get API perfectly running. Let's create another app, which is our API gateway. This will be our API gateway, which client will be used like the front end, and the API gateway will connect it to our user service to the microservice TCP transportation. So create a new app using the Nest CLI. The app will be named as API gateway. After successful creation, we will make some cleanup, remove some unnecessary file which will be no longer used in our application project. So for this scenario, we will first remove ptr, as well as some initial code like the testing file, app controller, and also app service. After that, go to app module and remove the references which we are removed. And in main.ts file, we will also change the port number 3000 to 3200, and we will add a console log to see which link our application is up and running. Now in terminal, let's start our application and see our application is perfectly running. So our app is running 3200 port. Let's open Postman and check the initial route. So as you can see, it didn't found any matched route, which means our app is perfectly running. Now in VS Code, let's create a file for our DTO. We will name it as a model.ts file. Inside this file, we will have two classes. One is login DTO and another is register DTO with following property, username and password. Now create a auth controller. Inside the auth controller, we will have two methods. One is for our login route and another is for our register route. So here I have a post route which is login route and following our login DTO. And another is our register route which is register method and following our register DTO. Now add it to our app module controllers array. Okay, so now our user service application and API gateway service application both are ready to integrate microservice. For implementing microservice, we have to first install NestJS/microservice package to our both services. For this, now we will add it to our user service using yarn. Now we will make some changes in our user service main.ts file. First thing, now we will connect our microservice using app.connectMicroservice method following the microservice options. Here we will define transportation as a TCP, as we have to import transportation for NestJS microservice. The options, we will provide the local host as its IP and we will set the port 4200, and after that we will asynchronously start our microservice using start all microservices method. So that's it for main.ts file changes. So our app is now microservice available. Let's start this application using yarn start and check our HTTP APIs are up and running. So here our application is running for 4200. Let's check our both HTTP call. Here we have to see both of our HTTP route is working perfectly. Now our API gateway application, we will also install the NestJS microservice package using yarn. And after it's successfully installed, we'll go to our auth controller and define a variable client, which type will be client proxy from our NestJS microservice. Now in the constructor function, we will assign it value as client proxy factory. It will also import it from NestJS microservice. The client proxy factory has a create method which will instantiate our microservice with using those options. For the transportation, as we use TCP transportation, we'll first import transportation and define that TCP. As well as our options object, we will provide host as our localhost IP address and our following port number, which uses in user service. So now our both API gateway service and user service both are compatible using microservice using NestJS microservice package. For now, our goal is whenever we hit API gateway login route using username and password, it will send it through using TCP transportation to our user service. Achieve the client proxy provides us the send method, which accepts an object using command property a string as well as second property as a payload, which we will send over to our user service. Now we have sent it to message to this .client.send method to our user service. The login is auth login and second one is auth register as well as the payload. Now let's test it on Postman. Here I open Postman and try to register. It throws an internal server error. If we get into the terminal, we will be able to see an error. There is no matching handler defined in remote server. Here remote server means our user server. Let's open user application and go to user controller. Here we will first import message pattern decorator from NestJS microservice, which will help us to receive event from our HTTP server, which is API gateway. Here we has defined auth register as following as same in our auth register route in API gateway. Now let's get back to the Postman again. Open register tab and request for new user creation, and it was successful. Let's try to create another user in another name. Now create another request in the get request to our user service, which route will be users by username. So this will be a get request and we will check that our created user is successfully stored and our user service is not. So here I will copy the username and paste it here and request it. We see it's successfully created from our user service, which means our microservice user register is successfully worked. Now let's test our login route, which will get user information by their username. Here as you can see, the username message pattern is not set. So here in user service we will define a new method get user by username and define the message pattern auth login. Here the payload will comes from username, so payload dot username. Whenever the login API hit, it will send an auth login event message pattern to our user service following the username. The username will be returned. So here as you can see, our John Doe equity, there is internal server error because the user is not found. So we have to make some changes inside our user service. So here we will first check this user is exist on our array. If not, we will send an error. As you can see now, if we hit this, it will return the message on status code 404. So now our application is fully microservice compatible. We connect our API gateway, auth, login and register route to our user service, which is in another app through the TCP transportation message pattern. So here I register another user using Jubair, and if I try to get it by login route, it will return the Jubair. So it's perfectly working. We need to some refactor to our application. Let's do it in next page. In app module, we can define our microservice using the client module. For now, we are declare it on our auth controller, but we can also declare it on our module. So no longer we have to implement it on each module. Here we will first import the client module, and after that we will use the client module.register method. It accepts an array. Here we will put our all microservices if we have multiple microservices. In objects, each object will define by some property, name of the services and transportation, and also the as well as the options. Is initiated. Let's open the auth controller and make some refactor to it. We will no longer use through this .client proxy factory. We will remove it from constructor and as well as the variable which refers the client proxy. Now in constructor param we will use inject following our user service name, which is user service. Inside the app module we define in client register module, and following the private property client, the type will be client proxy. That's it. Now our application is fully optimized and cleaner, much more cleaner. Now test it again on Postman. As you can see, we will get the user by username it's working, and register route working, as well as the auth route is also working. So that's it for today. See you in next video.